What is the longest you've gone without knowing a person's name? My next door neighbor introduced himself when he moved in. I promptly forgot his name. I danced around it for that same 5 years. He was from a French-speaking part of Canada, so when talking with my wife, he was French guy next door 5 years after first meeting. He admits in a conversation that he'd forgotten my name. We have a good laugh and reintroduce ourselves. His name was Guy. I had it right the whole time. He was French guy next door. French guy next door, not be confused with Venezuelan guy next door. That's a different guy. I moved into my condo in 2011 and I introduced myself to my one neighbor next door to me, but instantly forgot his name. We would see each other in passing 4 years and I would always just say hi in the casual conversation. I met my wife in 2018 from a long distance relationship, and when she finally moved in with me there was the awkward moment when I introduced her to him. I said, "This is my fiance, X, and we are getting married next month." He said, "Congratulations and nice to meet you," then walked away. She asked me what his name was, and I said I have no ducking clue. Later that day she said his name is Brad, and I was like, oh, he looks like a Brad, and she said he had no ducking clue what my name was either, so no big deal. The fact that neither of you knew each other's names for that long and neither of you got caught is just hilarious. My name is apparently Darren to this nice couple who own a restaurant in my town. My name is not Darren. I've known them for 2 years. We're even Facebook friends. They can literally see and read my name, but it's cool. I always wanted to try being a Darren. I like this reply the best. Darren. I've been on the receiving end of this. My nickname in college was the Mayor, and I had people I had known for years coming up to me at my graduation saying I had no idea your name was actually Dan. I had the same thing. I went to a smaller college and I'm from Chicago, so the name stuck. After I told people where I was from, multiple times people would hear my name and say, "That's your name? I'm still calling you Chicago." A whole school year I knew their names, I just didn't know which twin was which, and they weren't identical. I have 2 cousins named Matthew and Martin. They are not twins and don't look anything like each other, but I have no idea which one is which. I've lived in my townhouse for almost 5 years now, and I don't know the name of the guy who lives directly across from me. I have pretty regular interactions with most of my neighbors, but I've never talked with this one guy beyond just exchanging pleasantries while palling each other. When I moved in and first met him, I immediately forgot his name. I was almost positive he said it was Mike, so I went about 4 years just assuming that was probably his name, but not quite confident enough to actually call him Mike. Then a few months ago I was talking to some other neighbors in the parking lot when he walked by, and my other neighbors called out, "Hey, name that is not Mike." So it was confirmed that this guy's name is not, in fact, Mike, and I was relieved I hadn't been calling him that for the past 5 years, but I immediately forgot again what his name actually is, so now all I know is that it is something other than Mike. My I'll learn his name by the time I've lived here 10 years. Why don't you get someone to break your arm? Then you can get it plastered up and ask him to sign your cast. My cousin gave birth to a baby girl like a year ago, and I still don't know her name. Maybe you can wait a few years until she's 4 or 5 and ask if she can spell her name. She'd be excited to do it for you. Most likely over a decade. I'm in the UK and I've got to know many a bar acquaintance down my local pub. Over time you get to know about their work, hobbies, likes and dislikes. You get to know how many kids they have, how many times they have been married, etc, etc. Then a friend from out of town visits you, and as you do in the UK, you go to the pub. Lo and behold, your pub acquaintance is there, and you introduce your pal from out of town, only to realize you know everything about your pub pal. Everything except their bloody name. ILS16H49. A whole date. Someone fixed us up, but my dude never told me her name, just the address she wanted me to pick her up. I didn't have guts to ask her name between the date. Edit. She became a long-time GF after that date and we laughed about it forever. Once made it for 5 dates including staying at her place twice. I just had her saved in my phone as cutie bar X and then avoided saying her name. Finally, the second time at her place, she went to the bathroom and sneaked a peek at her stack of mail to find her name. Work in a pharmacy. A young woman, say late teens early 20s, came up and asked to pick up her grandmother's prescription. I said no problem. What's her name? She looked at me with a blank face, asked me to hold on, and called her family. This one is hilarious. I'm a waiter. There are lots of customers who are regulars and I've known them for years, some of them close to a decade. Very few of them, I know their names. Some of them get nicknames amongst the staff. Some favorites are Twix Man, as he would always leave a Twix chocolate bar with a tip. Emma and Stacy Carrot 1, two sisters who used to come in a lot. I know their names, but not which one is which. The vegans, a young couple who are vegan but really cool. I do know their names now, to be fair. Waiting is funny like that. First they're randoms, then you get to know them and their order, and then you become familiar, but never exchange names. I've had many, like half-strength flat white man, 2 glees of white wine couple, gluten-free, dairy-free, fructose-free lady. My parents. 5 years at least. I thought my mum was called Auntie because my sister-in-law called her that, and didn't find out that wasn't true until I was 6 or 7. The guy around the corner I buy weed from has just been the weed guy for 3+ years. A lot of us know weed guy. Dog park people. We see each other and talk almost every day, but they are always dogs named Mum/Dad. I'm sure at some point their name come up, but I just keep forgetting. My dog's groomer does this too. Like I walk in and she yells my dog's name. Mom is here. Makes sense, she spends way more time with him than she does with me, lol. I work at record store. There's a guy who's been coming in weekly for the entire 11 years I've worked there. We just call him Sweaty Polish Guy. He always pays with cash. Dating my girlfriend for a year. Still don't know her name. Premarital name knowledge is a sin. Unexpected Mormon. This is about a person who refused to learn my name. I'd moved away from my hometown. This dude, let's call him Matt, had started hanging out with friends of mine. I'd come back to visit from time to time. Matt would be there, and I'd introduce myself every time. This went on for about 3 years. Every single time I saw him, he would extend his hand to me for a shake and say, "Hi, I'm Matt, and who are you?" The part that rubbed me the wrong way was that he always asked, "And who are you?" I kept letting it go, including one time at a memorial for a very close friend who had passed. Up walks Matt, extends his hand to me and says again, "Hi, I'm Matt, and who are you?" I mean, who am I? Just some dude grieving, and decided this wasn't the time or place and let it go again. Not a year later, another friend pees. This happens again at the next funeral. I'm asked, "And you are?" and I walked away this time. Later that night, some mutual friends invite me over for some drinks and to remember our lost friend. Well, guess what? Here comes Matt. Twice in one day I get, "And who are you?" My heart is broken, and this person who pretends I don't exist is questioning my existence again. I turn to the mutual friends we have, explain to them that this is exactly what I have been telling them Matt does, and it drives me crazy. So I explained to Matt that I'm sick of his game and that we'd met dozens of times throughout the years, and questioning who I'm in the houses of people I grew up with is hurtful and feels at times like an attempt to remove me from the only group of friends I've had since I was a kid. He admits he knew my name the entire time, and he's sorry because he claimed he was just trying to protect his friends. From what? He claimed from someone he didn't know, but also didn't bother to ask them about, or even feign enough interest to act like a decent human and address a friend of a friend by name. He's just a petty a-hole. Maybe your friends talk you up and make you sound awesome, and he's jealous. He does this just to put you in your place and make himself feel better. What is the longest you've gone without knowing a person's name? About 23 years. Didn't know his first name. That turned out to be important for me in a weird way. He was a Marine gunnery sergeant in Vietnam. Gunnery sergeants are addressed as Gunny. I never called him anything else but that. He didn't make it back. 23 years later, I visited the wall and learned his first name. Made a difference for me. Hard to explain. Here's a story. Fair warning, it's a long one, dark. That was beautifully written. Thank you for taking the time to write it all down and spread the story of Irving. I appreciate it. I once worked with a man for 3 years and didn't learn his name. Best friend I ever had. We still never talk sometimes. Ron, is that you? 10 years. The people from my office, but from different division. They seem to know me and often call me out when I pass by, but I don't know their names, and at this point it seems awkward to ask them. The company website might have clues. The exterminator that came to my parents' house every month to spray it had a very long Polish last name, many consonants, few vowels. People tried to pronounce it, but just couldn't. Instead, they simply referred to him as the Bugman. That Krzyzewski, working as an exterminator during off-season. At work we have this old dude who drives shuttles. His name is Ron. I say, "Hey Ron," every time I see him. 5 years down the road I see Ron standing next to another old dude. Turns out we have to shuttle drivers. I've been saying hi Ron to the other guy 50% of the time for 5 years. Does this count? Your brain's facial recognition might not be operating at optimal levels. My entire life I still don't know everyone's name. Hi, I'm Rick. 2 years is the longest so far. I used to be a club promoter, and I had a guy that bought tickets from me for every event he went to. He told me his name when I first met him, but I forgot it soon after he told me. Meeting lots of people makes it hard to remember names, especially when I don't even know if I'll ever see them again, so what's the point of remembering everyone's names? After a certain point I saw him out partying often enough, but it was past the point where I could ask him his name without it being awkward. I had him saved in my phone as Sir Prince Albert, since he told me about his piercing, so that I'd know who was texting me if we ever texted each other, but I didn't think to add his name, since I wasn't sure what it was, so that was no help. Eventually we ended up at a party together, and some people walked in and asked, "Hey, have you seen Phil?" After not remembering meeting anyone that night named Phil, I said, "No, I don't think there's a Phil here." Then that guy whose name I couldn't remember came up and joined the group and said, "I'm right here. Don't worry, Screecher Pete. These guys are cool, I invited them." At that moment I finally found out his name and I played it off as, "Oh okay, well, if they are your friends then I guess it's cool if they stay," and just went with it. Edit. I was a dumber and spelled my own username wrong. Very loosely related story, but at a vape shop I used to frequent, the guy who usually worked behind the bar would do something similar. If somebody called asking about a patron, he'd always say, "I'm not sure, let me check," before covering the phone and asking the person if they were present or not. Evidently he tended bar for like a decade, and the habit just stuck. Decades. I meet a lot of people thanks to my job and I have a fairly distinct name, so folks seem to remember me. Between my weed smoking and chisty memory I kinda gave up. Yeah, seriously, the only Rexavision I ever met. A little over 7 years. Really tall redneck that was kind of a rig where I work. It's an analytical laboratory. He brought his samples from one of the production areas. I'm apparently responsible for his nickname, Big Ducker. I called him that Big Ducker early on. People misheard me and the name stuck. Sorry Tim. Yeah, Big Ducking Jerk. Same thing happened with one of my dad's friends. His nickname was Tum Tum because he was like 64 and 350 pounds, then lost a bunch of weight and is now an MMA fighter. I thought his nickname was Dum Dum. Still don't remember his real name. This was like 5 years ago. Yes, you must not own a dog. I know all the neighborhood dogs' names, but their human counterparts? Nope. It's too late to ask at this point. I'm the same. I know my neighbor's dog's name, and they know my kid's name. But we don't know each other's names. Lol. My first year of uni I had this weed dealer slash friend. When he introduced himself I thought he said, and I asked him multiple times if he could repeat it, and I even said it back to him. So for the first year I called him N. That's how it was in my phone too. Well, at the end of the year I learned that his name was actually Ian, and that I had misheard due to his accent. That's why you ask, how do you spell that? For more than 20 years with some of my relatives. I don't meet them often, but when I do, they all greet me by my name, even their kids whom I meet for the first time. Imagine having to deal with more than 20 people that know your name and how you relate to them for days on end. I feel that. I'm from a decently large family with a big age gap between me and my cousins who started getting married and having kids when I was about 6. I didn't have anyone to grow up alongside from my family. As the kid of the youngest sibling on both sides who grew up with their siblings old enough to be out of the house, I'm estranged on both sides. The bit that always confused me is my parents lived with and cared for the family patriarch for decades, unrecognized, while my aunt went off and has established her own little clan in another city. She literally calls it a clan, to make it nice and clear that there is in people and out people. My father. So obviously, like every other kid, I always called dad dad, but I must have been about 6 or 7 when I learned my father's name was Roy. Everyone called him Roy. That was the name on his driver's license. I knew that was his name. When I was around 12, we moved from Texas to another state. After living there a few years, we ended up taking a trip with some close friends of my parents and their kids. Now, since moving, my dad had gotten a new license in the new state. As we all sat down and waited for the plane to take off, one of the attendants came over the intercom. "We'll all come to the front of the aircraft." I can't remember the problem, but I wasn't paying attention because I didn't know a rule until my father stood up and headed for the front of the plane. I sat there stunned, trying to process why my father was suddenly known as Raul. As it turns out, in Texas you can have your nickname on your license, and the English version of Raul was Roy. So for my father's entire life he had Roy put on his license. When we moved, he had to have it changed back to Raul. Cheers. I just remembered I didn't know my grandfather's name till I was about 20. He always went by Jack. Even on his hospital bed whiteboard it said Jack. I always thought it was Jack. Turns out Jack is short for John. Ducked if I know why. 1 year and still going. It's my piano teacher. He told me his name once, and we don't really talk, and I call him stuff like you. Try calling him Maestro. See how that goes. I buy beer from a family-owned convenience store almost daily. The guy that works behind the counter says my name every time I walk in, and I call him man. It's been at least 4 years at this point. I'm in too deep to ask now. Nice try, mom. I lived next door to an elderly woman for about 10 years. Her name was Nellie, and she was always very sweet. Her daughter came over one day and told me Willie died. I told her I didn't know a Willie, but I was very sorry for her loss. She looked at me like I was nuts and said I'd lived next door to her mom for 10 years. Turns out I misheard her, and she had bad hearing. We both heard what we expected to hear. Going on 8 years now, I think. It was a guy from uni. He probably told me his name when we were drunk, but I forgot and haven't asked him since. We see each other once a month or something like that. 4 years. I've been calling this dude. I went to school with Wesley for 4 years. At the last day of school after 4 years, he came up to me and said, "BTW, my name is Nick. How did you mix up Nick Lacano for Wesley Crusher?" 2005 to this day. The waitress in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. One of the best long-running tropes in any show. The fact that even Charlie Hoss psychotically obsessed with her doesn't know her name is so funny. I always have had a terrible memory for names. It showed when a summer school friend I had called dude the entire time, and I still can't remember their name to this day after being friends for a couple months. But that wasn't even the worst. High school, freshman year, I was in a new school and didn't know anyone. Managed to find a nice group of nerdy friends, though it got me hooked on MTG. One day I was introducing a new person to the group, yet I had totally blanked on his name. I didn't want to admit it, and so had the smart idea of jokingly introducing him as Bob. Clearly not his name yet. Instead of correcting me, he rolled with it. From then on, everyone in our group knew him as Bob, to the point that an entire circle of friends didn't know his real name. It wasn't until 3 years later, when in the senior year, we were asking a teacher where Bob was, and he looked confused and asked us if we meant Kevin. Now I still remember his real name, even if I haven't spoken to him in over 10 years. MTG is so odd. You play with people at stores regularly for months and no one ever introduces themselves, but you all know each other and make small talk. 2 months maybe. A girl who was a mutual acquaintance would regularly call me and talk a lot. I really didn't get her name when she introduced. Didn't ask until, while sitting in break, someone shouted her name from across the class. I don't remember her name anymore. Would. So, funny story. I met a girl and really hit it off with her, but she never told me her name. We texted a ton, made plans to go on a date, and I was extremely excited. She delved really deep into her life story and experiences, but still, no name. I knew her first pet's name, the street she grew up on, and basically every other security question. I could tell you the age that she decided what her career path would be, or her favorite ice cream flavor. It was so jarring. It was some real Seinfeldy inches, I'm telling you. I deliberated on how to find out her name, asking friends and loved ones advice on this. On a side note, my friends give Chiz advice it turns out. My cousin finally said to me, "Ask her, you idiot." And so I did. She ghosted me. I guess it wasn't meant to be. Obviously the best trick is taking her to Starbucks. I still have to ask my brother-in-law's name. So 2 years I guess. I love that you keep asking. Power move. I was confused about my grandmother's name until I was 17. I didn't know my dad's name till I was 17, so I think you good. All my life, I don't know the names of some of my cousins. Almost a year after the 1 month mark, it just became too awkward to ask for the name, and the worst part was her being in my tight-knit group of friends, but I didn't even know what letter her name started with. "Hey, I just realized I don't have your phone number. Can you text me with your name when you get a chance?" "Hey, bucko. Nice to see you. Champ." 2 years. When I was in college I smoked and played hacky sack with a guy from another program every day. 5 days a week I would talk to him at least once or twice daily, and we would spend 20 minutes or so together. I called him buddy and he called me man. "Hey buddy, hey man, bahahahaha." A buddy of mine called me Mario all through high school. My name is Alex, but he thought I looked like Super Mario, the video game, so that's what he called me. I never corrected him, because I thought he knew my real name and just wanted to call me Mario. I thought it was a cool nickname. Sometime during senior year, he heard me respond to Alex. He was shocked. He was like, "Wait, your name isn't Mario?" And I was like, "I know. I thought you knew my real name was Alex." He called me Mario for 4 years, not knowing my real name was Alex the whole time, lol. When I was like 13, I had my first BF who was a neighbor. He egregiously pronounced my name wrong the first time I met him, and so did his family as a result, and for some reason I didn't want to correct him. We dated for a year and I never said anything. My father had a friend nicknamed Cookie that he met during the 68-foot events. My sister asked him what was her real name. He told us he has no idea. Going into my 4th year of not knowing my neighbor's name, and we talk regularly. Over a decade, me and my brother had a nanny from when I was born until I was about 12. She is like my second mom. Her name is Edna, except it actually isn't. It is Emilia, and it took me years to find out. Apparently when she introduced herself to her previous employers, they misheard Edna for Emilia, and she just rolled with it. So when they recommended her to my parents, she was called Edna. So everyone in the family called her Edna, and she was fine with it. I don't remember ever calling her Emilia. Even when I found out, she told me I could keep with Edna cause that was just what we were used to, and she was fine with this name. I spent 18 months at my current job with a guy calling me Dave. One day he called me over, and some other guys looked at him like he was nuts. When he found out my real name he was upset and spent the next 6 months apologizing. Here's the thing, I didn't mind because I'm useless at remembering names. It's 2 years since he stopped apologizing, but he wears his ID badge back to front, and to this day I'm not entirely sure what he's called. About 10 years and counting. The newsagents I buy a newspaper from each morning know my name because it's on the vouchers I use. I know one of their staff's names and am too embarrassed to ask anyone else. I'm also a social dancer, or was before lockdown, and don't know the names of most of the women I dance with. So both my crush and I were interested in each other, but I don't remember names for some reason. So I pulled a sneaky asked for her number, then asked how her name was spelled. One of my biggest brain moments. UHHPAM. I once worked with a man for 3 years and never got to know his name. Best friend I ever had. We still never talk sometimes. My uncles. I just guess on a biblical name and usually get it. My dad has lots of brothers. Roman Catholic family. Surprise. But we all remember the one who has been married 5 times, because pretty much for all of my siblings and I, the first wedding we've ever been to was one of those 5. Since before conception, I have yet to learn my grandma and great grandma's names. They're both just called grandma. Similar issue. For about 8 years, my grandmother and great grandmother were called Ma and Granny respectively, but my grandfather and great grandfather, Grandpa Jim and Grandpa George, I was able to get away with it because they were usually in separate areas. Go to the garden and get Grandpa George. Grandpa Jim needs you in his office. Grandpa George is in the hen house. Grandpa Jim is going to teach you to ride a mower. Until I was 8, and both were in the living room, and I was asked to bring Grandpa Jim some iced tea. I just stood there in doorway until I just said Grandpa Jim, and Jim waved at me. Never forgot after that. At my work is an identical twin. After 8 years I still don't know who I'm talking to. I was friends with this guy on Xbox. His username was Gusianthalus. I met him playing Black Ops 3 around 2015. We played so much, but I always called him Goose. It wasn't until last year when we played with his IRL friends and they said, "So how's it going, Matt?" My mind was blown. Movie/book characters. The entire movie. The entire book. I've known this guy from the gym for like 8 years now. He's ducking cool, and every time I see him, I talk to him for like 10 minutes about gym stuff. I have no idea what his name is. 2 years. The nice lady that works at my storage unit. I'm not outgoing or chatty, but she is, and I wound up having long pleasant chats with her every time I see her. She knew what's my name, but my window closed. It's now super weird/funny to me. 3 years. Everyone called him on his nickname because his full name was ridiculous. His name was Gaylord after his great granddad, but rolled with Gary. 37 years and counting. A guy 2 years ahead of me in high school. We took Spanish 1 together in my freshman year. He has always called me Busk, and I call him the ever popular dude. We wound up going to the same university and the same major. I've since seen him about a dozen times at high school reunions and social functions in my old high school friend group. I last saw him at a funeral for a classmate. I'm pretty sure we will both go to our grades not knowing each other's name, and I think we are both okay with that. Where else to share this other than Reddit, where no one knows me? In college I got hammered and hooked up with a guy in the back of a van. Clay, I know. In a hoe. Drunk me could not process his name. Swear he said his name was Shabunla. He would call me, and we would chat, and it wasn't until like 3 weeks in that he said his name again, and I understood it finally as Seamus. So at least then I knew I'd Seamus, and not Shabumla, and that was a relief. 3 weeks, and I was sleeping with her. She was in my phone as Bohemian Rhapsody. Going on 3 years now. The guy works in a different department, but we sit together during lunch and I have yet to learn, or even ask for his name. I couldn't remember my mate's partner's name when I was introducing them to my partner 2 weeks before their wedding. I know some people whose names I never learned. I'm crap with names and crap with faces. I generally get names from social media. I mean, I'd say I've gone my whole life without knowing a vast majority of people's names. The problem for me is I do know their name, but I don't know what they look like. Regularly email a Sarah in my organization, but wouldn't know who she is from a Hadoop. Problematic when told to go see someone, and I'm supposed to know who and where they are, but we've only met face to face maybe twice in 7 years. I have seen them every year of my entire existence, but for the life of me, I can't remember the names of any of my mom's aunts or uncles. It also doesn't help that there are apparently aunts and uncles that are just my grandparents' friends, and they have generic old people named like Betty and Geraldine and Vernon. 3 years. A guy I had known as Guy was actually named Steve. We had a good laugh over that. 14-hour flight from Atlanta to Cape Town when I was in college. I had just taken a red-eye from SF to Atlanta and was pretty drunk and got seated next to a very beautiful woman also studying abroad in South Africa. We talk and flirt and it goes very well for the first hour, and then I fell asleep for an hour, woke up having forgotten her name, and we spent the rest of the flight in an awkward 12-hour silence. I'm in a program at my high school that only has around 50 kids in each grade. I didn't figure out one girl's name until the beginning of junior year. I never had clues with her, never really saw her that often, and never talked to her, but I finally figured her name out. Do dads count? Are dads not people? Priest: Rachel, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Me: Rachel. That's what it is. Like 2 years. Super common in my area. A lot of people will only give out their nickname. 30 odd years. I still don't know my father's name, but I had a picture of him for 20 odd years. He was in the delivery room, but left of the birth certificate. 2 years. Technically, I'm about to break the record as I'm counting on 3 other people. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.